Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are, and welcome to the Nutrition and Wellness for Myeloma chapter. My name is Audrey Burton-Bethke, for those of you who don't know me, and I am the Myeloma Crowd Community Manager. I will be pulling up some slides in order to make some intro announcements, and that way we can get started. So as I mentioned, this is the Nutrition and Wellness for Myeloma event brought to you by the Myeloma Crowd Community Program by HealthTree. And my name is Audrey. I'm really grateful for your attendance, your support here as I see people continue to trickle in. I'm excited to join together and learn from Kristin Kabay. She's a registered dietitian with the Plant Powered Metro New York organization, and I will formally introduce her in just a moment. Today's session will be recorded, and the recording along with the slides will be sent to all registrants within 48 hours after the event has concluded. As always, I would like to thank our sponsors, without whom this would not be possible: Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen Oncology, Genentech, Adaptive Biotechnologies, Sanofi Oncopeptides, Karyopharm Therapeutics, Takeda Oncology, Janssen, and AbbVie. The event agenda for today is as follows. My introductions will last just a couple more minutes. We will then turn the time over to Kristin, who I will introduce formally in just a moment. After her presentation, we will open up this event for question and answers. And this meeting is scheduled for 90 minutes and will end around 2:30 p.m. Eastern if we don't end sooner than that. So today's topic is You've Got This, Making a Successful Transition to Plant-Based Nutrition Part 1. We'll have Part 2 in September. I'll explain that more later. But throughout the year, we've heard from many experts in this Nutrition Wellness for Myeloma chapter. Whether you're new to the chapter or whether you've been there since day one, we've heard from specialists who have highly recommended a whole food plant-based diet. They've shown us through science and through clinical trials and through different evidence that a whole food plant-based diet can improve your overall health. Dr. Shah showed us how it improves your ability to fight myeloma. We watched Dr. Gulati tell us how it helps us with diabetes. We heard from the Esselsteins about how it helps us with heart health, and from Dr. Osfeld as well. And it's just been so fun to hear from these experts who have spent their lives dedicated to studying this and to promoting this, that a whole food plant-based diet is what is best for our health. But applying it is a whole different story. We can, just like life, it's easier said than done. And we can hear people tell us a billion times how it's so important to eat the right food, but how do we actually go about doing it? So Dr. Urvi Shah, who I mentioned earlier, she's a multiple myeloma specialist, and she helped connect us with Plant Powered Metro New York, and they're a foundation whose mission it is to spread the word about plant-based eating, the importance of it, but also how to practically apply it in our diet, how to adapt our culture, how to adapt our way of thinking so we can more fully embrace this plant-based diet. So we are really excited to learn what to stock our pantries with, what kind of recipes are going to inspire us to cook and eat in this brand new way. It is now my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker to you. Kristin Kabay, MSRD, CSSD, is a registered dietitian and nutrition educator for the Plant Powered Metro New York network. As a preteen in the early 90s, Kristin began following a vegetarian diet because she couldn't stomach the idea of harming animals. While her family didn't object, they believed it was just a phase she would eventually grow out of. Fast forward over 25 years later, and Kristin's phase is anything but. She eventually transitioned to a completely whole food plant-based diet and even pursued a career as a registered dietitian and lifestyle as medicine advocate. In her personal life, Kristin is a lifelong athlete and runner. She found her food choices only further propelled her active lifestyle as an endurance athlete and 6-time Boston marathoner. Her passion for sports and plant-based eating finally merged, leading her to specialize in sports nutrition and counsel athletes wishing to improve their performance. Today, she is a practicing dietitian, an enduring believer in the power of a whole food plant-based diet to heal and promote health for all. So with that being said, we will turn the time over to Kristin, and we are really excited to hear from her.
Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here, and thank you for having me. I'm going to talk a little bit about the actual implication. I know you heard a lot of amazing speakers that you guys have had about the why, but now it's time to really put these practices into place and give you some ideas on how to actually eat more plant-based and how to kind of start this journey. I don't have slides today, but what I am going to do is share some handouts at the end so that you guys have access to them in terms of grocery lists and those types of things for your use. Okay, so this is going to be about where do we start? How do we start this process? And really, this is something that I do pretty much every day with my clients, and we start with the kitchen. So think about, and just depending on where you are right now, if you are in your kitchen, maybe go there and kind of look around, see what you want to start with if you are adopting a plant-based diet. Are you ready to jump full in? Is this 100% you're going to go and, jump full in, or is this something that's more gradual? And I think that's a very personal, decision. See where you are in this journey. Most people, it doesn't happen overnight. So I think that is completely fine. A lot of people, it takes them, at least 6 months to kind of transition into eating more whole food plant-based. So that would be the first place that I would start, is asking yourself, how much time, where am I, what am I ready to do? And then once you decide that, you can kind of go down the list. Okay, so I'm gonna use the example of giving up dairy. That seems to be pretty easy for most people. Let's look in your refrigerator. So what are some of your things that you see in there? Are you ready to maybe, throw them out? Maybe we're looking at milk. I find that's very easy for a lot of people to kind of switch over to a plant-based. And kind of go that way. So that's how I would start this process. If you're already maybe giving up dairy, then maybe jump into things like eggs or maybe some red meat. Those are typically some of the big categories that are just really easy to find substitutions, and we're going to talk about some of that. Okay, so if you are in your kitchen, maybe grab that thing that you're ready to kind of part ways with, and have that as your starting place. Okay. And then getting into restocking. So if you've made that list and said, all right, you know what, I am going to give up dairy. Where is dairy hiding in my fridge, in my pantry, all of that good stuff. So I think one of the best things to do is being a little bit prepared. It takes a little bit of effort. But again, there's so many resources and dietitians, and maybe with the group here, you can kind of talk about these things together, but going down the list. So finding out, looking in the fridge, in the freezer, in your pantry, even, maybe not so much for dairy, but in the spice cabinet, what are the things that you're going to, get ready to change, and then have that list and start organizing that way. If you have a big family, you might do this a little bit differently than if you're cooking alone and for yourself. So I think that's something else that you can take into account. Also, bulk ordering can save you a lot of money if you're ready to overhaul everything. I think that's also something that you could really save money on. And then, your regular shopping needs. So are you going to be, ordering in bulk, or are you planning to go to the grocery store a couple times a week or once a week, or however that is? This can also help you really organize, what you're ready to give up. Okay. So I like to have, my clients, and especially via Zoom now, I meet so many of them in their own kitchens. They'll run in and grab, a food and ask me about the labels. So if you are in your kitchen, think about what you'd like to start with, and then find that, make a little list, dairy, the meats, whatever it is that you're ready to start with, and then go that way. Think about how often you want to restock. Are you going to be ordering in bulk? Again, that probably saves you some money. And then how frequently you will be visiting your grocery store. Okay. So lots of organization in the beginning, but it really, really is helpful because I find this is one of the most overwhelming parts. People just don't know where to start. And then again, so if you've got your list, again, if you're jumping full in, if you're picking one item, go with what you're comfortable and ready to kind of start with. Now we're looking at, okay, now it's time to restock and reorganize. So these are just some helpful hints that I have and use with my own clients. But using clear storage containers, if these are new foods, you may not, automatically remember, oh, I've got lentils in my pantry, or I've got quinoa. So, using those clear storage containers so that you can see, it helps you stay organized a little bit better. You might put a best by date on some of these. If you're buying dry goods, they last a lot longer. So it's generally nice to have them on hand. And then I always say, think about it in terms of organization. So if we're talking about your pantry, you might put all of the legumes and dried beans and that type of thing, or even canned beans in the same area. When you walk into your pantry, you'll see, oh, you know what? That's what I have. I can make a dish with this. Okay. So it just helps you, if you're unfamiliar with some of these, products and different new foods, when you see it, you'll automatically kind of remember, oh, okay, I'm going to try this new recipe I found. And, it requires some black beans or something of that nature. Okay. I like to also stock up on whole grains. So things like, your brown rices and quinoas. I use those a lot. Your nuts and seeds. And I will say that whole food is definitely the way to go, but maybe you're doing a little bit of nut butters, and so you can kind of figure out what you tolerate, what works with your body, what you actually enjoy, and what you'll cook with and use. Organizing your spice cabinet, we're watching for salts and things of that nature. That's just healthy nutrition for everybody. So finding herbs and spices that are rich in antioxidants and have a lot of anti-inflammatory compounds can really boost your nutrition, and maybe it's something that you're kind of now trying a little bit different, I would say, things and different spices and herbs. Condiments, that's a big one. Again, I think when we're talking about changing to a more whole food, plant-based style of eating, typically I see a lot of like dairy products in condiments. So that's something that you can kind of look out for. And there are just simply really, really amazing sauces and things that you can buy that are more whole food, plant-based, that have, the base of real ingredients. And we'll talk about some more of these things. And then lastly, kind of in terms of organizing your kitchen, I think it's also really helpful to think about like how you cook. Do you bake? Like, what are some things that we might be able to, kind of plant-based, we'll create them in a plant-based style. So if you're somebody that likes to bake, think about what are those staples and what do we need to have on hand so that we can make this a more plant-based recipe. Okay. The other thing I find that people don't think about that's not necessarily food related, but absolutely important is now you're maybe cooking with some different stuff. What kitchen appliances do you need? That's so, so, so important. And if this is just brand new, completely 100% for you, keeping it really simple is going to make it a lot easier for you to transition. So your kitchen appliances, I know for my personal self, my Vitamix is something of having a really good blender so that you can make, smoothies or sauces. The ever popular, steamers and like the pressure cookers, slow cookers. Those things are really simple. You're throwing a couple of ingredients in and then cooking, maybe in batch lunch, or maybe you just need a quick dinner, with a pressure cooker ready in 20 minutes, that can make this transition a lot easier, because there's nothing worse than wanting to do this, but then not having the right utensils in the kitchen. So those are just some things to also think about. So if you are in your kitchen, think about that. Like, do I have a blender? Do I have a food processor? What will I actually use? What will make my life and my nutrition a lot easier for me? Because that's the last thing you want, is to make this more of a headache. Um, and then, now you've thought about those things, you've kind of figured out what you might be swapping initially, so the dairy, the meats, or something of that nature. Now you're actually ready. So you're going to clean out whatever it is that you're going to get rid of. So go into that fridge, go into your cabinets, your freezer, pull those things aside. And maybe you give them away. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe they just go in the garbage. I'm not really sure. But find something to do with them. And these are just, again, some of my suggestions and places that I find clients typically are okay with starting with. So number one, and not necessarily plant-based, but just from a healthy standpoint, we want to look for excess sugars. So anything that is got a lot of added sugar, that's not great for anyone. So, the dessert section, the candies, the cookies, like that type of thing. In your freezer, maybe you've got some ice cream. Things that are jarred foods that have a lot of oil in them. That oil is not necessarily the best thing for us. So maybe swapping those types of foods out. Your milk and cheese, again, we're just talking about things that you might want to start with and clearing out. White flour products, so like white breads and white crackers and those types of things that really don't have the fiber and the whole grain component to them. Okay, so those are some good places to start. Pastas is another one. Those white pastas are really void in a lot of those minerals and vitamins. Okay, a whole food plant-based diet really does not use oil. Okay, and so we're maybe getting rid of some of the excess oils that we have. And again, we talked about the sugars and that type of thing. So you starting the process, you are pulling these things, and again, go with what you're comfortable with. I know sometimes it can be a little overwhelming. And then what you're going to do, so you're going to make that list, and let's talk kind of what you're going to swap it out with and replace. So some of the things that I suggest having on hand are things that make your life easier. Okay, that's always the number one thing. People just are out of time. We're all lead very busy lives. And if you're dealing with health issues, you might not always want to cook fancy meals. So we want things simple. We want them easy. I love pre-washed, pre-cut, and pre-bagged vegetables. That is probably one of my favorite things to keep on hand. And it can really be anything that's fresh. And again, that just takes away some of the prep time that you have to, have if you're cooking more whole food plant-based. And it's not unhealthy. You're buying fresh stuff. So that really can save you time if you don't have to wash and chop, all of that good stuff. Okay. Love to have on hand, green leafies, whether I'm making a salad or some type of bowl. Those are really good things that can be used in a lot of different recipes, smoothies, soups, those types of things. Okay. I like to also have frozen vegetables. I love frozen vegetables. If, I'm had a long day. I know that you guys don't know me, but I am also in becoming a nurse right now, and my days are very long. And so frozen veggies are absolutely okay. They are, frozen right at the point of kind of harvest. So a lot of the times I get questions about, is that actually healthy for me? Is it, as good as something that's fresh? And I would say, absolutely, you want to go for those frozens, and you can make really good meals with them. The other thing that I like to suggest, so we're talking about, eating more whole food plant-based. If you can tolerate it, adding some whole, maybe edamame beans that you can keep in your freezer. They go great in salads and bowls, that type of, even maybe a snack. I do like and eat tofu and tempeh. They're both whole soy products. So those are also really good things to kind of have and kind of think about keeping in your fridge or freezer. Okay. And then kind of going down the list, and again, I'm going to share some kind of a list of groceries for you guys. But potatoes, I know. Everybody hears so much, kind of don't eat potatoes; they're not good. And it's actually the potato itself is actually quite nutritious. White potatoes are an amazing source of potassium. And then we've got our color. So I'm a huge, huge, huge color fan. My plate is super colorful. And in the potato category, you can do purple or that bright orange. So all of those colors represent nutrients, antioxidants, phytochemicals that are really working to reduce inflammation and lots of other things inside of our body. So that's the good stuff. Also going down the list of more of a protein, I mentioned before having lentils or beans. And again, if you want to make them and you want to have dry, that's fantastic. If you're not, you don't have time for that, the cans are fine. Okay. So having those types of staples on hand are really nice, and start thinking about that. Again, I mentioned brown rice and quinoa, having, oats, either steel cut or rolled. Those are going to be a little bit less processed than those instant. And then we can add stuff to them so that they become really nutritious for us. I mentioned, some pastas. So maybe think about, if you do eat pasta, swapping out for a bean-based, or even quinoa. That sometimes is a little bit lower in fiber and whatnot. But those bean-based, so chia is really popular, or lentil, they have a really high amount of protein as well. So that's a really good source for a quick, easy meal. Add some veggies, and then you're good to go. So those are just a couple of other things. We talked about your actual pantry, and maybe some of the other things that you cook with a little bit. So think about, canned tomatoes or canned sauces, that type of thing. Again, low sugar, low, salt. We don't really want oils there. Having vegetable broth, low sodium vegetable broth is really good. It can be used in so many different recipes. And then if you are somebody that bakes, and this is just kind of, good, helping you to reduce sugar in your diet a little bit, using things like applesauce, or I even love pumpkin puree as a replacer for different oils and fats when I bake. Having even dried fruits that you can add to stuff, or even as snacks, that's another good one to kind of keep on hand. And then garlic. Maybe you love fresh garlic, and maybe you don't want to deal with, peeling and mincing. So you having minced garlic or something like that on hand might also help. Don't neglect that spice cabinet, like I mentioned. There are so many amazing, very, very powerful antioxidants in a lot of spices. So things like turmeric, I mean, that's very popular. We all know about that. Even cinnamon and pumpkin spice, those types of things can be really great to add to your diet if you don't already have them. But then thinking about just kind of your general cooking. So Italian or Indian, whatever your kind of flavor is, that can be a really great thing to add. And then, I don't know where you are in your plant-based journey, but very popular is nutritional yeast. It kind of gives a little bit of a cheesy flavor to food, so you can sprinkle it on salads and soups and bowls and that type of thing. That's something also that I like to keep on hand. And then let's talk about actually going to the grocery store. So you've thought about what you're going to swap out. Okay. And now you've made your list, you're ready, you're going to go and hit the aisles. Okay. So create your list at home. Think about, maybe get a couple of recipes that you'd like to try, or that, you've heard are good. And so you're going to create that list from what your decisions are. Okay. I always advise clients, do not shop when you're hungry. You'll want everything and anything, and probably not the best choices there. Think about, again, what you need for your week, your family, just for you, the things that may be, buying in bulk, or, going to the grocery store more frequently. Those are some things to kind of keep in mind. Always, I like to suggest, if you can shop seasonally, that's a little bit more budget friendly. And even, maybe you're getting things from like a source like Imperfect Food. So if you're thinking about, getting more produce in your diet, that's a good place. The sometimes referred to as like reject companies that can make buying a little bit easier. Okay. So you're ready, you're going to the grocery store. What is one of the things that you can do? So, one of the first kind of tips I have is, especially for shifting to more whole food plant based, is shopping the perimeter of the grocery store. So, usually grocery stores are organized in a very similar fashion. You walk in and it's the produce. That's where you want to spend the most of your time. That's what has really the good food for us. Okay, so spend time there, get to know things. I like to tell people, try one thing, try something, one thing new that you haven't before. You know, again, think color. So green, red, yellow, orange. That's what you want to fill your kind of meals with. So try to pick one in every category. I talked about, potatoes. That's a good one for root vegetables, but even things like parsnips. So that's a white one. But again, a really good kind of carbohydrate if you can digest that and it works for you. Your fruits, easy. Most people love fruit. That's generally not a problem. Again, think color there. And then, um, you know, just look at, also think about how much you're going to buy. I know that sometimes we think, oh, we need this, this, and this. But in the beginning, if you're brand new to this, less is more. Okay, it's always easier to get more than having too much on hand, and then you've got excess that you just have to throw away. So I love to challenge people to find one new vegetable they haven't ever seen. If you shop at a farmer's market, maybe you can ask them what's in season, what's good, talk to them about, that type of thing. That's always fun to try new stuff, especially on this new plant-based journey. And then, once you're done there, go down, you've got your list, go down and go through either the some of the grains, or like we talked about, I mentioned the pastas or those types of things, and really start looking at the label. So what does it say? You're going to see your nutrition facts label. Most of what we buy, hopefully on a whole food plant-based diet, doesn't really need a label. Apples don't come with labels. Broccoli doesn't have a label. But when you are buying some of those other staples, watch out. These are the big three. SOS is what I like to call them. So sugar, so the added sugar, excuse me, the oils, and then the salt. So those are the big three that you want to, the kind of the problem children of the nutrition world, if you will. Okay, so we're looking for those, and again, I know that it's going to be hard to maybe exclude some of those, I should say, the sugar, oil, and salt completely, but keep them low. Okay, that's always the best to look out for there. And then, if for instance you've decided that dairy is what you're going to give up, read the ingredients. So you will sometimes see dairy listed as something like whey. Maybe it's milk solids or casein. Those are not necessarily saying it's dairy. So just be aware. The same thing happens a lot for sugars. Okay, so corn syrup, cane juice, malted barley, all kinds of other names for sugar. So really, it's imperative that you read and just kind of be aware of what's on that label. All right. Um, and again, if you're trying to stay within a certain range in terms of fats or sugars, just be aware of how much something has in it. I like to also suggest looking at making sure that the food has fiber. If you're eating whole food plant-based, that's generally not a problem at all. And then something that may be helpful for some people if they're brand new on this journey is using what I like to call a traffic light system. So, we've got red, green, and yellow, and red typically means, whoa, we don't really want that in our diet, stop. And those are really the ultra processed foods. So things that have lots of sugar and oil and salt, processed meats. So hot dog and bacon, all of those things that we know are highly inflammatory. We don't want those in our diet, okay? If we move down, so maybe things that are a little bit more yellow category, that would be, maybe more of the processed foods. So, even things like maybe you love bread And there's a bread that is just got a lot of additives and preservatives. While it's not the worst thing in the world, it maybe is not also the best. Okay, so that's what I like to call the yellow, kind of cautionary food category. And with maybe on occasion having some of those things in your diet is okay, but really keeping them low is better. And then green light foods, these are the unprocessed whole food plants that we really want you to fill your diet with. Whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, seeds, fruits, all fruits, veggies. Those are really herbs, spices. Those are really what should make up the majority of your diet. Okay. And then, when you're going down, kind of stick to your list so that you don't end up with too much. Unless you just love to cook, it's always better and easier to kind of, see what works in your kitchen and then come back to the drawing board. Maybe revise your list, maybe find a new recipe or add on to. Those are some things that I find very helpful for people when they're switching to whole food plant-based. Don't be afraid, like I mentioned earlier, to visit the frozen section. It can be really, really helpful in terms of time saving. Frozen produce is absolutely, again, okay. You just want to watch the sauces with it. It's always best to make your own sauce if you can, but and then add it. But read those labels. And then if you are somebody that is, really trying to budget this, I do find that eating plant-based is significantly less expensive. So that's a very good benefit. A steak compared to beans, very, very big cost difference there. But other tips are, looking at maybe some of the kind of more international markets. I know where I live, the big kind of Asian grocery store is amazing. They have great produce and it's so much cheaper sometimes. Even things like Trader Joe's, they've got really, really good low affordable prices in terms of buying new produce and things, especially if you're unsure if you're going to actually like it. So those are great things. And then also, depending on where you live, looking at the CSA, like the farm box shares, those can also give you a good taste of some new produce as well. Okay. And then just really quickly, some very, very top quick kind of questions I get a lot. You're switching to a whole food plant-based diet. Should you buy organic? And I think that, one of the most helpful strategies that you can kind of incorporate is using the EWG, so Environmental Working Group. They've got their Dirty Dozen list, and it is kind of the 12 things that you should never buy, just regular. And they have their Clean 15. So if kind of you're trying to budget all of this, using those two things as your guide can really be a huge cost saver. So the Dirty Dozen, always buy those organic, and the Clean 15, if you want to buy them organic, that's great. If not, it should be okay. All right. And then lastly, questions that I get about soy, and we don't have time to jump into all the details, but there's a lot of myths surrounding soy and consuming soy. And so some of them can be, again, I'll share some resources with you all, but that soy causes breast cancer. It's a myth. Soy can make you more feminine if you're a man. That's a myth. The phytoestrogens, so the compounds that are actually beneficial in soy, can disturb your thyroid function. That's also a myth. And that all soy is GMO. That's also a myth. So again, if you're buying organic, you should be okay with that soy. And then we will get into all of the healthy swaps in our next session. So I have time for Q&A now.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I learned a lot. That was really interesting and motivated me again to look through that pantry and decide, or that fridge more likely.
Yeah.
And the freezer, and decide what to keep and what to eliminate. We have a couple questions and we'd love to welcome more. If you want to enter in your question at the bottom of the screen, you should see a little Q&A icon. If you want to click on that and type in your question, we should be able to answer them, and I'll moderate them so Kristin can answer them for us. Lori is saying, I found that some of the plant-based substitutes are not any more nutritious or healthy than the original foods. Do you have a suggestion of what to avoid or how to evaluate an item?
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And it really comes down to those, yellow and red light kind of, remember I told you about the grading system. One of the first things that I look at is the total fat. And in a lot of the, I'll use the burgers. I think Impossible or Beyond are very, very popular. And while it's good in a sense that it's helping you transition, um, in a long-term setting, eating them every day, you're right. They're not great for us. There's a couple of brands that I find are a little bit better. Dr. Prager's is one of them. It tends to be a lot lower in fat. They're actually made with, whole food. So you'll see peas and broccoli on the actual list as opposed to, just a couple of kind of who knows what they are categories, ingredients. That would be the first thing. Look at the total fat. A lot of them are using coconut oil. Again, really, really high in saturated fat, which is not great for anyone. So see if you can find one there, maybe less than 10 grams. And I know I don't know your personal health situation, but at least that gives you kind of a starting place. And then the other thing I would say is that I know, we're looking for easy things, but sometimes if you can maybe make your own, they're really simple to make, your own veggie burger. Just adding everything, as I said, like in a food processor, hitting the button, forming them, baking them, or grilling them, and then you've got maybe a couple that something to have throughout the week. So that's the other solution. Maybe not always the easiest thing, but yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. At my house, we make black bean burgers and quinoa burgers, and it's been
Yeah.
really fun to make that transition.
Yeah.
And we figured that the whole wheat buns that we're now getting actually taste better than buns that we used to get. So
Exactly.
it's
And I
nice.
will say this, your taste buds adapt. It generally takes, 2-ish weeks or so. We can actually lose the preference, the preference for fat. So when you do get something that's really high in fat after that, you're like, whoa, this tastes like just heavy. It's really strange. But give yourself 2 weeks if you're trying to kind of change your diet a little bit.
Awesome. Scott is wondering, what about those frozen French fries that only have about 3 grams of fat per serving and 0.5 saturated? They're essentially baked. Would you put that as a yellow, as a
Yeah,
green?
I would use it probably as a yellow. Again, if it's kind of like a spectrum. We eat. You think about a whole food. So what we'll use the sweet potato. Hope maybe there's sweet potato fry. In its whole food form, it's the best. And then we do a little bit of something, so it gets a little bit. The more we add, the general rule, kind of the less healthy it is for us. So I would be lying if I said I don't eat sweet potato fries. It's not an
Yeah.
everyday food. It's kind of like a treat. And if you
Uh-huh.
make them yourself, they're actually really good. If you have an air fryer, that's another one. Then you control the amount of oil and all of that kind of stuff that you're putting on it. So it becomes much, much, much healthier. And you find you actually enjoy them. They taste so good. So
Awesome. Thank you. We actually have several questions about oil.
mhm.
And oil is a funny topic when it comes to the whole food plant-based diet, because I would say even the experts or the people that have studied this for a long time kind of differ on opinions of what oils to use, whether to use oil or not. So let's start with just the basic questions that people have about olive oil. Where would you put that in in the lighting stages, and
Sure.
how much is the recommended?
So there's really not, I would say, a recommended, but I will say this, it really depends on the specific person. I have seen instances where people have cut out the oils from their diet, and in terms of a heart health situation, things have improved dramatically. I tend to follow kind of that category where if there is a little oil in my diet, it's not the worst thing, but it's not something I'm dousing my food in. Nobody can eat 100% perfect all the time. So I would
Uh-huh.
say, don't stress out. Like this shouldn't be a stressor. But if you can exclude, again, I think when you look at what Americans eat across the board, and our diet is very high in lots of different oils, and they all do kind of function differently. So, try to stay away from high saturated fat, the tropical oils the most. Again, if you're someone that's just starting out and you cook with a lot of butter, then yeah, olive oil is going to be a better
Mhm.
substitution there. So go with, again, where you are in this journey, and then maybe it's like, all right, I've been doing this for a while. I am going to cut back on some of the oils that I use, and I think that there's some definite health benefits there. Again, everybody's very different, so
Uh-huh.
talk with your physician, or get a dietitian. But have that conversation, and I think that don't beat yourself up. Start with where you are, and go from there.
I like that because we've talked about nutrition and the whole plant-based diet pretty much all year. And I think the general consensus and what we've tried to do in our house is, okay, instead of 2 tablespoons, we'll do 1.5, and then eventually one, and then work down that way. We're learning new ways, kind of like I was really interested, and I'd like to talk a little bit more. You said you use pumpkin puree
Yeah.
instead of an oil. I know we're going to talk more about substitutions next month, but I'd love to hear, just since we're on the topic of oil, what are some substitutions that you use?
So if I'm sauteing, and that's really how I love to cook on the stovetop like that. I use a little bit of broth, and I know if you're someone that cooks with a lot of oil, you're thinking, "Oh my God, this is like blasphemy! Like this should not be happening." But again, your taste buds adapt, and you really do learn that it tastes completely fine. You use a lot of, like, I love fresh herbs and spices. You use that, a little bit of vegetable broth. Some clients of mine will use like water, that's fine with them. And then you're just like, sauteing there. If you're roasting something in the oven, having like, so for vegetables, or I'll give you an example with like chickpeas, having them be really dry, so not putting like wet stuff in, can actually make them crispy, which is why we use, a lot of the time, the oil. We want it to be crispy. So
Yeah.
just learning those little tricks, in terms of the pumpkin, you can replace, a lot of the butter and the oil with some of the, like, applesauce is a good one, or pumpkin. I find that they both work, and especially with fall, it's like, who doesn't want pumpkin in their baked products? It's so
Yeah,
good.
that's
It really
awesome.
is, and it's like a lighter, almost, tasting kind of, food, if you
Okay,
will. Yeah.
awesome. Talk a little bit more. You started to talk a little bit about what to do for roasting, and maybe I just didn't hear the end of that sentence, but what do you do in the
Oh,
instead of
yeah.
oil?
So if I'm roasting something, I will just make sure whatever I'm roasting is very dry. And a lot of the plant-based recipes now, because there is this, kind of push to kind of, get away from so much oil in our food,
Yeah.
they give you instructions, and it's great. It's really nice. Like, Forks Over Knives has a lot of good ones. Our own, plant powered, we've got our own kind of recipe database, which is fantastic. We have a lot of, chefs that are trained, and so they have created some really good recipes too. But again, for me personally, I'm quick, easy. I make things very, very simple. I will use lots of fresh spices, or, excuse me, fresh herbs or spices when I roast, and then just adapt the cooking time depending on what it is. So it might need to go a little bit longer, or, a little bit shorter. So
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
yeah.
Um, this is a good comment, and I'm not sure that you'll be able to speak to it due to kind of its medical nature, but
Hmm.
Gerardo says that she was told 4 tablespoons of olive oil is good for the heart, which is, I think, a conception that was true and was shared, that olive oil is good for the heart. How do we balance that in terms of this whole food plant-based diet, avoiding olive oil?
Yeah, and again, I think it really just depends on you and your specific, like, what you've got going on in terms of your own health. Um, you know, I don't really. I wish I could say I have like a research study that said 4 tablespoons, because that's kind of like an arbitrary number, in my
Right.
opinion. You know, and I think that you can probably find research that supports both ways, but when you actually, again, I'm thinking of specific instances where I have seen people with really, really, a lot of coronary artery disease, and cardiovascular disease is literally like the number one cause of
Yeah,
mortality in
killer.
our
Yeah.
country.
Mhm.
And so you just watch people, and they really, I want to say, heal. I mean, for lack of a better word, once they change their diet and get rid of some of those, high fat, foods. And it's like, okay, see what that looks like for you, and then maybe, test it out, like where you are with it. um get your blood work done. That's the other thing. The proof is
Yeah.
is really there when you start to see numbers start to go, on the decline, that were maybe elevated. It's another way that you can say, like, hey, this is actually working for me. So
Yeah. Something just to add to that, I've noticed, we talked about sugar, that they put 7,000 different names for sugar in their ingredients to try to sneak it in there. I found that as oil as well. They put oil in the weirdest things, especially these protein drinks or drinks that are
yes,
advertised as very healthy. And it's kind of hard because you do have to measure it against the scale. Well, instead of a milkshake, is this proteins, drink healthier? Yes, but when you look at the saturated fat due to the oil and things like that, it's
absolutely.
very surprising. And I think, I don't know, that's one more thing that I would
Yeah,
add, what I've learned along my whole food plant-based journey is beware of the oil that they're sneaking in, because
yeah.
okay, if you use a tablespoon of oil for roasting your vegetables, like that's where you want your oil. You don't want it in the drink that you drink that morning.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why, reading your nutrition labels is so important. And something else that I have clients will do on occasion, and this is, it really helps give them a sense of empowerment. And I don't recommend this like all the time and for everyone. It's not something you need to do forever, but maybe keeping track of what you eat for a day or two with one of the
Mhm.
nutrition apps. And, you can scan an ingredient label, and then it pulls it up. And then at the end of the day, you can kind of do an assessment. You know what? Oh, my saturated fat is through the roof. Whoa, I didn't realize it was coming from the drink. Or,
Right.
wow, you know what? I don't eat that much. I'm doing really good. Like, and then you have, again, you have a metric to kind of play with, and then say, all right, you know what? I got a little wiggle room, or I really need to pay more attention to what I'm eating. So that can be a very helpful exercise for just, a day or so. I know it's not
Yeah.
something forever.
It's been helpful for our family. I was able to show my husband how much sodium is in Taco Bell.
Through the roof. It's through the roof.
Yeah, it's sodium warnings. It's like warning, too much sodium,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because we love those bean burritos. So we have to make our own now.
They're so easy to make though.
I know. So Leonidas or Leonid, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but how do you recommend to eat eggs and how many per week? So I've seen some nutritionists put eggs in that yellow category because
Mhm.
they're not meat, but they're not great, Where would you put it in terms of that color category? And then what are some good substitutions for eggs as well?
So, in terms of the category, again, I think it depends on you, and I know that frustrates people so much when it's always it depends. But if you're somebody that is starting out with this, and again, you eat eggs, multiple, that's like your normal breakfast. If we can cut that down, and you're now eating, a couple times a week, then I think that's a good kind of swap. If you have, again, an egg every once in a while, I don't think that that's the worst thing in the world,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm just being very honest. I personally do not eat them. But if that's something that, is the one thing that, you just really need to have or want to have every once in a while, maybe it goes in that yellow category. Um, and then in terms of swapping them out, oh, and I will say this about the yellow category. Again, look at your blood work. Look at, like, have that conversation with whoever is, helping you with your health care, and, see, is this making things a lot worse, or, whatever. So that's what I would say there. And then in terms of swapping them out, it depends on what you're using or using them in. If it's for baking, there's lots of substitutes. So you can do like a flax egg, which is literally flax seed ground with a little bit of water. Some companies now have kind of pre-made that for you a little bit. But it's super easy. You just take ground flaxseed, mix it with water, let it sit. It turns into a gel. Now we've got some omega-3 kind of, you know, antioxidant, like omega-3 fatty acids. Lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Coming into the diet, and that is a heart healthy. So a seed now that we can add in, and fiber, and that
And you
can
can do
take.
that with chia seeds as well, right?
Exactly. Those are two good ones. Kind of newer in the plant-based cooking world is aquafaba. So it's the liquid part of the chickpea. So, everybody says drain the juice. If you save that, you can actually whip that and make it almost into like egg peaks, if you will. It takes a
Wow.
little bit of like labor. So, maybe have some good bicep muscles there.
Or a
But you can,
KitchenAid.
yeah, exactly. But you can now cook with that. And that can also be an egg replacer. A little bit more on the process side. So one of those yellow categories that I would say is there's, like products now like Just Egg, that if you are using like a tablespoon or so, it is made from mung beans. So that's nice that it's an actual like, whole food. So a little bit of, I think, excess salt in it. Don't remember the label exactly, but again, tiny, small amounts of these things might be okay. And then even things like banana, I've seen that work in recipes. So this is
Yeah.
whole food right there.
I think we've done bananas, we've done applesauce. I
Mm-hmm.
want to try the flaxseed and the chia seed because I recently heard about that. And
Yeah.
then this chickpea juice kind of sounds interesting.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So Carrie is wondering, she buys fresh veggies and then she doesn't know what or how to cook them other than steaming them, which that was totally me at the beginning of my journey. What is a good source for recipes?
So I will do a shameless plug here for Plant Powered, our recipe app, and it's not like a true app on your phone, but you have to access it on your browser. It is free, and we have so there's a very popular. It's the PCRM. Like kind of cooking for life is the course. So you actually go and get certified to cook
Oh,
and like
wow.
learn these recipes and learn some of these whole food plant-based cooking styles. So with Plant Powered Metro New York, we have those people that have helped create some of these recipes, and you can access them for free. I can share the info
Yeah.
with you so that you can have them. Other good sources, PCRM itself, Forks Over Knives. I really like nutritionfacts.org. So he's got a cookbook, How Not to Die, which I love. It's
Yes.
fun. A lot of those recipes are online for free as well. But those are some good, just easy. I would say before you go buy, so this is what I was talking about, have your list. Don't buy too much. Maybe buy one or two and that's it, veggie. And then, you have the recipe already on hand so that you can, know what to do with it.
Yeah.
Soups are coming. I think it's kind of maybe starting to get a little warm or cold in certain areas.
Uh, yeah, awesome. If you want to send me that
Yeah,
resource,
I
we
will.
send out a follow-up email within 48 hours of the event's conclusion, and we'll include that in our resources that we send in that email as well as the recording. Um, Another thing just to add to that, I asked for my birthday for whole food plant-based recipe books, and it's Barnes and Noble, we're not sponsored or anything, but Barnes and Noble, different bookstores, this is becoming more and more popular, and I wouldn't say as a fad diet, but more science is proving that this whole food plant-based diet makes a difference. So there was actually quite a variety at the bookstore where we were able to choose from some and get some really good recipes that we've been trying. And there's just searching online, we've been able to find some really good ones.
And I would also say, to kind of piggyback up that, is that if you do have a favorite, kind of regular dish that you just love, see if you can, make it into a plant-based version of that. And it's so easy to do. Again, I think I like to use the burger as the kind of, standard example. The making veggie burgers, they're delicious. And now you've got, beans and different, grains, or if you're going grain free, and then you can even, so one of the things that I find is hardest for people to add in are leafy greens, but they are the most healthy thing that you can
Mhm,
eat, one of
mhm.
them. And so you don't have to just eat salad. Maybe you kind of chop it very finely and mix that into the kind of veggie burger that you're eating. Now you've just added some green to that veggie burger without actually eating a salad.
Mhm.
And you boosted that nutrition a little bit. So there's all kinds of ways like that. There's a recipe that I have for, it's like you can either do a spinach or kale crepe, and I mean, it doesn't have to be sweet, it can be savory with veggies and whatnot, and that kind of a thing. So lots of
Oh, that's
ways that
fun.
you can eat it, yeah, without actually having to do, just the salad. Because I know, I guess that gets a little, old sometimes, or steaming, like we talked about. So
Yeah, yeah. I I like strongly believe in the taste buds adapting, because I was that girl that put ranch on everything, on everything. And my husband doesn't eat ranch, so he always thought it was gross. But I didn't know if I could do salads without ranch. I didn't know, and I did less and less ranch or other dressings, whatever it was, over time. And we started using lemon juice or lime juice instead, and it is, I crave it now. It's so good to me. And the flavor has changed over time, because the first time we did that lemon juice dressing, I was like, no, I'm not eating this ever again. But as you get like your taste, excuse me, 2 weeks really is a good time frame that, okay, I'm going to give myself 2 weeks, and you don't have to be eating it every day in those 2 weeks, but I'm going to be eating it within these 2 weeks, and it will change.
Yeah, yeah,
Your
it
taste
does.
buds will change.
I say this all the time, but you crave what you eat. So if you are eating vegetables, you will eventually crave them. And I think the other one that gets really hard for people is kind of that bitter taste. But just know, like, tell yourself what you're tasting bitter wise, that is the antioxidant. That is the good compound that you're tasting. So eventually, I know for myself, I things that I used to think were so bitter and couldn't eat them, I love them now. I'm like, I don't even taste the bitterness. So it does take a little bit of time, but be patient with yourself, and it's
I
okay.
agree. I agree. Just a reminder that we did schedule this to our attendees, that we did schedule this for 90 minutes. So we
Perfect.
do have more time for questions and answers. I'm getting several, so I think people know, but I just wanted to make sure, if you need to pop off earlier, that's totally fine. This is being recorded, and the recording will be sent out to all registrants. So we have a patient wondering if the first step, let's say the first step's getting rid of dairy. What kind of milk do you start with? Do you do almond, soy, coconut, and do you recommend certain brands?
I like to see, what, maybe if there's any specific dietary restraints that you have. Always looking at that label. Some very popular ones, obviously, almond is huge. It's kind of like the new king. And again, it's the same thing. So anything that is being made can be made unhealthy. So you want to look at
Yes.
sugar, and you want to look at the oil. So sometimes they're now adding some of the oil to some of these products. So look for one without. And I generally will just buy kind of a generic, wherever I'm shopping at the time. Here where I live, Whole Foods has the most, plant friendly stuff, so I tend to end up there a lot of the time, and they've got, just their general, like, store brand. That's okay typically. I also will do soy. I think, again, a little bit, if you really are having, maybe a hard time with eating more beans, that can be a good way to kind of get a little bit extra protein in your diet. That's okay. But typically, or even like a flax milk, that's a popular one now. So those are some of them. But you will see rice, and you will see hemp, and you will see walnut and cashew. So again, think about, the sugar and the oils. Think about, are you using this as a protein source? If not, maybe that's not necessarily a concern. Look at the fat and all of that good stuff.
Awesome. Dr. Shaw also mentioned in the very beginning of this Nutrition Wellness for Myeloma chapter that the more diversity you can give to your microbiome, the more it's going to thrive. So the fun part we've found, just in our personal experience about plant-based milks, is we've done oat for 2 weeks. And again, you want to look that it says milk and not beverage, because I've noticed that when it says oat beverage instead of milk, that's when they're adding in the oils and the whatever. Of course, that can change also, but they can sneak it in milk too. But and then we've tried almond, and then we've tried soy, and then cashew, and with yogurts as well. We tend to try to be diverse in that way. So it's just been fun to try to find that diversity for our microbiome.
I think that's a really great point. It really is. And it's like a new like little fun adventure every few weeks. Like you get to try some new stuff that you haven't experienced before.
Yep. Renuka's wondering, what about oh my gosh, I should know how to pronounce this. Amaranth greens, are they good?
Yes, I love them. And especially if you're looking for amaranth and Malay, and all of those are really good as opposed to just rice all the time. Like I know, we always do brown rice, and it's fine if you tolerate that. But if you're looking for, again, diversity, because they do have different nutrients associated with them. It's not just carbs or, the fiber component. There's different minerals and in different varying amounts and that type of thing in the different grains. So it's helpful from that component too. Yes. Load up on that.
Let's talk a little bit about tree nuts. How are they recommended in the diet, and how do we eat them?
Yeah.
How much do we eat?
So I think it's more in the context of, if you're somebody that is trying to maybe manage your weight, they are a high energy source, or excuse me, a high calorie source of food. They're great in whole form. Again, it's got the fiber intact, all of those nutrients. Hopefully they're not with salt and the oil like coated with them, or sugar. But even if you wanted to roast them yourself, it changes the texture and the kind of flavor of them, and it makes them so good. If you just pop them in the oven for a few minutes, you can add them to, again, just thinking about like, you don't have to just eat them, but adding them to a meal. So maybe it's like a little topper for a salad or a bowl that you've made. You can, incorporate them into your veggie burgers if you decide to make those, but they're really good, and also for a good snack. Typically, an ounce or so. So for every, nut or seed or whatever you're doing, it just depends on that specific, like what that portion is. So looking at the label can really help.
Perfect. Vicky asks something which I think is awesome. She says, if it's not too personal, can you tell us exactly what you ate yesterday? She just wants to understand what it looks like to really eat that whole food plant-based diet in your day. So
I will definitely share. I have no problem with that. I am super boring when it comes to like the variety. Now, not in terms of like, I eat a lot of the same food. Like, so I love smoothies, I love bowls, I love salads, but they're made with different plants, if you will. So yesterday I had a kale smoothie. Now that's maybe not everyone's favorite. My tip there is, if you're trying to do green smoothies, start with something that is a little bit less bitter. So even something like romaine or butterleaf can be less like, it's that bitter compound that you're tasting, or spinach. That's another kind of more mild one. And you don't have to add like the bag of kale. It can be a little bit, like maybe you just grab a small handful because you're dipping your toe into this. So go with what you're comfortable with. But I had that, and then what did I eat for lunch? I tend to do bowls a lot. So I make a big batch of like some kind of quinoa or something of that nature. I eat a lot of quinoa. And then always like a vegetable, either, just kind of roasted, or like I said, sauteed on the pan. That's something I do a lot. I might have done asparagus yesterday. And then I do eat tofu. So I like to just lightly grill it, or tempeh is another favorite, because it's kind of this like, it's fermented, and a little bit more of a nutty texture, if you will. So I had that. And then for dinner, I made a big salad because I had a lot of work to do and it just needed to be fast, and some cherries. So that was that. But if I'm cooking, I might make something like an Indian dish, or, I love chickpeas, and I do a lot of like sweet, you can do like a loaded sweet potato, getting like a purple or an orange, and then slicing that, baking that, topping it with, instead of a baked potato, butter, sour cream. Now you can do salsa and avocado and chives, and maybe you do a little bit of broccoli on top. I know it sounds strange, but it's really, really good with corn, like those types of things. Easy, fast, done.
Yeah. One of our favorite recipes, just to share with the group, we've found this sweet potato tortilla soup that we really like. It's delicious, whole food, plant-based. We eat a lot of sweet potatoes because it's like my favorite food.
They're
We
so good.
do Mexican quinoa stuffed potatoes, kind of like what you were just talking about. We do, tofu stir fry we did the other day. Again, lots of Thai foods and lots of Indian foods do tend to be more whole food plant-based. So it's really fun to incorporate those in your diet. So just some suggestions from us as well, or us being my family, not the Myeloma Crowd. Although the Myeloma Crowd would probably suggest them too. I did want to talk about the relationship. You said you're becoming a nurse. I talked to Dr. Osfeld last month or the month before, and as we talked, he described he didn't receive any nutrition education when he was first studying to become a cardiologist. And one of his life missions now is to go to the training cardiologists in his area and help train them about proper nutrition, such as this whole food plant-based diet. How do you personally see that transition in the medical field? And if so, is it hopeful, or do we still have a long ways to go? I mean, I just want to talk honestly about when these patients are going to their doctors. A lot of times these doctors don't have this kind of education. So how can we all work together to build global education about this?
I will say, I am hopeful. I don't want to paint a gloomy picture. I know that doctors probably will not, unless it's a very specific group. There's a couple of groups that are really trying to focus and teach, the up and coming, like, new generation culinary medicine and really focusing on nutrition. And that is fantastic because, we know food can have such a powerful impact on our bodies and our long-term health. I mean, that's just, there's no dispute there. And so when I see, a culinary nutrition, like kind of, it's like a 2-day event for doctors being offered, I'm like, oh, that's awesome, right? Like those things are happening. So I don't want anybody to leave here thinking like, oh, we're all doomed. Like, it's not that. But there are still areas that really need some work. And so I think, starting that conversation with your doctor and saying, hey, I really would like some information on this. If you don't know, can you guide me somewhere? Or, do you have a colleague or someone else that maybe I can kind of chat with? And so I think that's completely, it's happening. But I will say that I think most, doctors it's not that they don't want to do this. It's just not the way that it has been done. And so I find that most of them are very open to, they want to learn, they want to help. That's why they got into this profession. I really have not ever met a doctor that does not want to help their patients.
Right.
So just talk to them. But there are more and more physicians that are trying to educate themselves, taking, plant-based, like you said, I like to say there's one diet to rule them all. It is a plant-based diet. You see, like, what is the Diabetes Association, the Heart Association, I mean, literally all of these different groups, and it is eating more plant-based. And it's for some of the reasons I'm sure that many of the guest speakers that you guys have had have shared with you guys. So
Yeah.
it's happening. Don't worry.
No, good. I'm glad. And I've noticed that too, just within the last decade or 5 years, like the increase of awareness, kind of like what you said. It's not that they have a lot of other education and a lot more that they're focusing on, so I'm not trying to knock any doctors out there.
Absolutely.
But just the more education we can bring, the better, or the more light that we can bring to this kind of education, the better. This is so exciting. Thank you so much for joining with us today. We do have time for a couple more questions. If anyone has some questions left on their mind. I just, I think something important to note too, because as I've talked to a lot of patients, they kind of get overwhelmed. And I've really appreciated, Kristin, what you've been saying throughout the meeting. Start where you are, and if it is just, okay, this year I'm going to tackle weeding out dairy, then good for you that you want to make a change in your diet. If you're ready to take bigger steps, good for you, and you're going to find, I think, that it becomes easier once you start seeing the little goals being achieved.
Yeah.
So it's exciting. It's exciting to be a part of. Dr. Michael Greger, in his book, How Not to Die, talks about, if you are the person that loves ranch on their salad, like I did, eat the salad with lots of ranch. It's better that you get those veggies in your body than you consistently choose the Chinese food that doesn't have any nutritional value to it.
Absolutely.
So I guess the American Chinese food, I should say. So just also hopefully that can help as well, as you ponder and consider your journey and next steps. A couple more questions. So this is exciting. Suzanne's wondering, what constitutes a serving?
I know that's what everybody wants to know. Don't worry, Suzanne. It depends. I mean, again, it depends. If you're talking about vegetables, I'll give you the general rule, like a half a cup cooked and a cup of raw. So that's kind of my general take. A piece of fruit, and then like a half a cup of some cherries or something. Yeah, and things like the vegetables. I get what I always say to clients that I work with is like, don't worry about eating, too much broccoli, unless you're juicing, 10 pounds a day, then that don't do that. But if you're eating like a cup or two or whatever it is, that's not the problem. Most people do not eat enough. And that is the problem. I think, the old stat I have in my head is, we consume 0.2 cups of leafy greens a day as Americans in the country. Wow. So it's almost nothing. And like our most, favorite vegetable and that we consume the most of is like the potato, but in the French fry form. So, yeah. I don't worry that you're eating, too much, or even like fruit. That's something else. I always, get people, well, it has so much sugar. It has fiber. It has all of those nutrients. It has all of the phytochemicals. And I keep saying that, but that's why we eat this. That's what makes a plant-based diet so powerful. Those are the disease fighting kind of compounds, if you will. Mm-hmm. They're bioactive and they're working inside of you to really like help everything out. Let's just say that they're squashing all the inflammation and all of that, those types of things. So yeah. Load up on that. If you eat a couple too many cherries or raspberries, not an issue. So yeah, go for it.
The only issue might be gastro, but
yeah
adapt next time.
Exactly. That is sometimes a little bit of an issue.
A little too much fiber. Yeah. So Vicky is wondering, what about sweeteners like monk fruit or agave?
Yeah, agave,
or like dates as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Again, I think it depends on what you're trying to do. I always say, if you're just using a little bit, if you need that, like kind of your ranch comment, I personally will use stevia. I have no problem with stevia. It works with me. But if you are somebody that wants to use agave, it is still sugar. So it's not necessarily that it's healthier. It's more of a, I guess, more natural in its natural form, but it is still sugar. So use a little bit, measure it, get your little tablespoon or teaspoon out and kind of, see what that actually looks like. I find that we're really bad at kind of eyeballing things. So, but if you're going to use a little bit and that makes you eat that better food for you, I think that's a win. Mm-hmm. There. And then you can work on, maybe cutting down, the amount of sweetener that you use over time.
Awesome. Thank you. Jean or Jean, I'm not sure, is wondering where the protein comes from if we are eliminating all of the meats and eggs and dairy. This is an excellent question.
That's my favorite question. And so one of the things that I think, because broccoli and all of those lovely foods don't come with labels, we don't actually see what their nutritional value is. And while they don't maybe have as much protein as a steak, they do have protein in them. So all vegetables will have some protein. And the goal is to get you to eat a variety of those things over the course of the day so that over time, you're getting enough throughout the day. So veggies have them, and then higher protein sources in the plant-based kingdom, your beans, all of those, the legumes. If you're okay with doing some soy, you can do tofu or tempeh. I always say, do less processed because we want to stay in that green kind of category. Some of the like someone asked before about the like faux burgers, those are not great. They're loaded with protein, but they're not great. And then again, this is a personal thing, but if you are okay with maybe some of the like pea protein, you can actually just buy plain pea protein. You don't have to buy like a protein powder. You can buy plain hemp protein, and maybe you're adding that. So again, like if you're baking or making your own veggie burgers, you can do a little bit of extra protein if that's something that you're a little worried about. I would say track maybe in a day. That's a really good exercise, again, just for that reason, so that you can really see, what, I do have nothing to worry about. I'm getting plenty. Or yeah, maybe I am a little low and I can just tweak one thing, add some beans or some tofu to a meal, and then have where I need to be for the day. So that's a really good question.
Yeah. And I think what I've found is you're getting more protein than you think you are. And I would say the popular trend right now is protein, the protein bars, the protein shakes, the protein powders, and you see it on the billboards and you see it on everything, protein, protein, protein. So a lot of that goes into our head. Am I getting enough protein? It happened to me.
Yeah.
And, we track our thing on this little app called MyFitnessPal.
Yeah.
And we were able to find that just by eating a consistent, like you were saying, Kristin, you can't not eat and then expect, I'm going to have sufficient protein. But if you're fueling yourself with proper foods, you probably are reaching more than the protein levels that you're expecting.
Yeah. And another category that I forgot to mention are, things like your grains too. So quinoa, I love it. It's a really great source. It's got a lot of different, different amino acids. And that is kind of the old thought was that you needed to combine certain foods together in order to make a complete protein. And that's just doesn't show to be true. We don't actually need to do that. So I suggest, if you get a couple of these things in, like you have some like serving of quinoa, you have some serving of beans, maybe a serving of tofu, that at least gives you 3 meals. And then you can maybe fill in the gaps if you're doing nuts or veggies, like you'll add more protein to the day and get probably just plenty.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We're going to finish up just with some outro announcements, but thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And we're excited to see you next month because you'll be joining us again. So thank you very much. We will end, like I said, with a couple of announcements. So, either the September 21st or 28th. So Kristin is still working with her schedule because, as she mentioned, she's going to school. She's super busy. We're so glad that she's taking the time to speak to us. We will get that date to you as soon as possible, as soon as she knows. And we can focus on part 2. So part 2 is going to include more healthy swaps for ingredients that we're probably better off without, how we can adapt those recipes, kind of like what Kristin was talking about. If you have a favorite recipe, what are some common substitutes that we can use for the ingredients that we need to be swapping out? How to build quick meals if you are, for example, I work full-time, I have a kid, I'm serving in my church. So how can we, take our busy schedules, but still maintain that healthy diet? And then finding more online resources as well to support us in our journey. Just a reminder that Kristin will be sending us resources to send out to you guys in the follow-up email along with this recording and the slides that I'm sharing. You may be interested in other Myeloma Crowd community events that we have coming up. The link to sign up for any of those events and even more events I have not mentioned today is found at the bottom of the slide and will be sent out in the follow-up email within 48 hours of the event's conclusion. I'll go over briefly a few of them. So Wednesday, August 25th at 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern is our African American chapter. We're going to be talking about Genetics 101 with Dr. Scott Goldsmith. He's a multiple myeloma specialist that has recently moved to City of Hope in California. Friday, August 27th at 1 p.m. is our immunotherapy treatment chapter. We're going to be talking about bispecific antibodies, which is a new myeloma treatment in the arsenal that is currently being tested in clinical trials. There's one approved. There's going to be 9 altogether. So it's going to be interesting to navigate both as specialists and as patients what's best for our care. So come to that with Dr. Marlon Holtkrantz. She's going to be explaining to us this bispecific antibody review so that we can be prepared. Wednesday, September 1st is our Muscles for Myeloma Fitness chapter. We're going to be talking about the Move Spring Challenge that we are launching this next month. It's being active for 20 minutes a day, celebrating or honoring Blood Cancer Awareness Month in September. Thursday, September 2nd at 1 p.m. Eastern is our stem cell transplant chapter. We're going to be hearing from Michael Riotto, who had an infection during his stem cell transplant and then pneumonia and then a whole process. We're going to be hearing from him what happens when stem cell transplants don't go as expected, because we want to give you a realistic sense of the rare possibility of maybe it not going as expected. Thursday, that same day at 7 p.m. Eastern is our MGUS and smoldering myeloma chapter. Dr. Jens Hillengas is coming to speak to us about how he is studying the relationship between fitness and myeloma progression. Tuesday, September 7th at 1 p.m. Eastern is our financial chapter. Diana Valentine, our myeloma financial coach, will be discussing good debt versus bad debt and what does this mean. Another thank you to our sponsors, Bristol Myers Squibb, Amgen Oncology, Genentech, Adaptive Biotechnologies, Sanofi Oncopeptides, Karyopharm Therapeutics, Takeda Oncology, Janssen Oncology, and AbbVie. And thank you very much for helping us build a strong Myeloma Crowd community and for joining us today. We appreciate you and hope that you have a great rest of your day. And thank you again, Kristin. We'll see you later.